as I was in his office in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, Jeff, they're going to get me. I'm always a little naive. I said, no, Mr. President, they're not going to get you, and I'm going to help you, and everything's going to be fine. And then in 2002, 2003, you wash the Bush administration. No IMF loans for Haiti. No World Bank loans for Haiti. Turn off the Inter-American Development Bank. This is the way you start tightening. Add sanctions. Squeeze the finances. Then the economy's cratering, but he stays in power. He's got a strong base, political base. One day, literally, the U.S. ambassador walks to his house and says, I need to save your life, because otherwise your life is at risk. There's an insurrection underway, so come with me. And they guide him to an unmarked plane, no tail markings, and they put him in the plane, and 23 hours later, he's in the Central African Republic. Okay, so there's a coup in broad daylight, and I called the New York Times reporter, and I said, could you cover this? The U.S. just overthrew the Haitian government. The reporter on the beat said, Jeff, my editor's not interested in it. So this is a game, and it's a very, very serious game, and it's getting us closer and closer to annihilation, because Haiti is one thing, Ukraine is another thing.
Right.
In Ukraine, we know in late January 2014, you have Victoria Nuland, now my colleague at Columbia University, on the phone with the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, who is still a senior State Department official. Okay, who's the new government going to be? Yeah, maybe Klitsch. No, not Klitsch. He should stay out. I think Yatsenuk, he's the guy. They discuss who they're going to put in for the new government. And on February 22nd, a few weeks later, it's Yatsenuk. He becomes the new prime minister. The U.S. is part of yet another coup. Is this, and by the way, that's the start of the Ukraine war. That's literally the start of the Ukraine war. The war didn't start in February 2022, it started in 2014.
But there's still thousands of Ukrainians who say we had very legitimate reasons to go to Maidan against Yanukovych. We were there because we didn't like our guy.
That's correct.
So the point being that two things could be true at the same time, right?
Yeah, but my view is that the United States should have nothing to do with overthrowing another government, period. And if you're overthrowing another government because you have a plan to put your military in that country, which is the U.S. plan since 1994, it raises the stakes a little more. And if you're putting in the military base next to the other nuclear superpower, you might say, not the best idea.
Right.
If you do that knowing, as I do, how many senior diplomats told the politicians, don't do that. Don't do that. This could be disaster. This could lead to war. And not just run-of-the-mill people. I'm talking about George Kennan saying this in 1997, in 1998, that this could be the most consequential disaster. Jack Matlock, who was U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union. Bill Perry, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Defense. I know these people. And they know, do not overthrow a Ukrainian government so that you can move NATO forward and expect you're going to have a good outcome. So that's why I say, I don't trust the Americans.
Right. No, and that's very clear. I want to come back to this through Netanyahu and Israel.
Okay.
Do you want him to face accountability for the crimes in Gaza, the bombing, the slaughter of thousands of people?
Of course. And it is brave and right of the International Criminal Court to have indicted him. Absolutely.
And do you see him as an extension of U.S. policy in the region?
No. I see the U.S. as an extension of Netanyahu policy.
You're lucky you're Jewish. They'd call you an anti-Semite.
Well, they can call me anything they want, but I can tell you the truth.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the truth, by the way.
Go ahead.
The truth is that Netanyahu said in 1996, in a book which I recently reread called Fighting Terrorism, he laid out the whole plan. And this is, by the way, quite interesting. It's just advice to any listeners. Usually when there are terrible plans, they don't hide them. Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. And I'm not meaning to make simplistic comparisons. I'm just making the point that people say what they're going to do.
Right.
And in a different sphere, and again, please don't misunderstand, because every time you say one, then it's a kerfuffle that people misunderstand. But Netanyahu wrote in 1996 his plan for how he was going to make Israel safe. Brzezinski wrote in 1997 a different book called The Grand Chessboard of how he was going to make the United States the world's unipolar power. So they write the story, and you can go back and evaluate. Did they know what they're talking about? Are they full of BS? Did they cause a lot of trouble? So just on 2 points, Brzezinski in 1997 says the U.S. can expand NATO. Russia will have no choice but to accede. What's Russia going to do? Is it going to become an ally of China? No way, says Brzezinski. You know, okay, interesting. Didn't quite get that one, writes Big. So that's one idea.
Right.
Netanyahu has a different idea, and it's coherent, but it's kind of madness. His idea is we captured the Palestinian lands in 1967, and we're never going to give them back. There are really two schools of thought in Israel of the extremists. I don't think Netanyahu, I don't know what his religious views are. Actually, I don't care. But anyway, he says, I'm not going to give it back because it would be unsafe for Israel to give it back. So we're just going to rule over the Palestinians. There's a second take which says we're not going to give it back because God in the year 700 BC or in the year 1000 BC, but written in a book, the book of Joshua in the year 700 BC, told us it's ours. And there are people that absolutely believe that as well. Both of them are now in an alliance in this most extremist Israeli government. But going back to 1996, Netanyahu spells out very clearly the following story. He says, we're going to keep the land. There will be resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, other militant resistance. What will we do about it? You can't really fight the terrorists, he says. You have to fight the states that back the terrorists.
And Iran is the central one in his mind.
But interestingly for Netanyahu, he lays out one by one, yes, of course, Iran is the central one in his mind, but so too is Iraq under Saddam. He supported Hamas.
Right.
So too is Bashar al-Assad in Syria. So too is Somalia. So too is Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. So too is the government in Sudan.
So you see one by
so
one.
So too in Lebanon.
Right.
You know, he laid it out, and he at various times listed the countries. And one list that showed up in the Pentagon just after 9/11 was 7 countries: Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. And you know what the plan was? 7 wars in 5 years. And is this the U.S. using Israel? No, no, no. This is Israel using the U.S. as if our military is in their hands, which in effect it is. You take Wolfowitz and you take Feith and you take these neocons and you take Netanyahu. They game planned the whole thing out. Well, I regard Netanyahu as having been our greatest disastrous president of the 21st century because he ran American foreign policy for 20 years and he cost us trillions of dollars. And where is the Middle East today? War in Syria, war in Lebanon, war in Palestine, unrest in Iraq,